Welcome to Foundations of Therapeutic Modalities and Classic Psychoanalysis. By the end of this session, you should be able to discuss the contributions of key theorists in classic psychoanalysis, describe the fundamental concepts of classic psychoanalysis, as well as discuss some of its strengths and limitations. In this session, we will be taking a closer look at Sigmund Freud's contributions to classic psychoanalysis, its development, some of its fundamental concepts, dream interpretation, and we'll be exploring the concepts of id, ego, and superego. As we're exploring background-focused therapies, it's rather fitting to take a look at the background of Sigmund Freud. He was born into a Jewish family in 1856 and was the eldest of 8 children and lost an 8-month-old brother when he was just 19 months old. His early experiences helped kind of fuel his passionate interest in the human psyche and the difficulties he experienced in his own life that kind of led him down a path to explore the meaning of dreams and the subconscious mind. He had early memories of feeling resentful toward his brother, and this was a guilt that allegedly left him feeling quite terrible. These experiences undoubtedly had a role to play in his clinical focus on the impact of early childhood experiences. Freud's early work focused on neurology, and during the 1880s, he became interested in the work of a rather well-known physician in Vienna by the name of Joseph Breuer. And Breuer treated emotional disorders with hypnosis and expressing oneself verbally. So Freud became interested, increasingly actually, in psychological disorders and their treatment. And this is where the case of Anna O was really instrumental in driving him in this direction. So this is a woman who was suffering from conversion disorder. This is a disorder that presents with paralysis of limbs and disturbances of different senses, such as sight, as well as eating and speech. So his early work used questioning techniques to kind of bring out material and promote self-exploration. So this was really what we would call an early version of modern psychotherapy. And he continued to emphasize the importance of patient self-expression and free association throughout his career. Way back in 1896, Freud coined the term psychoanalysis. His search to understand the human psyche led him to his very significant work on dream interpretation, and he identified this connection that we are now very aware of between the mind and the body, and he also formed the Vienna Psychoanalytical Society. Freud's work placed great emphasis on the influence of biology and early childhood experiences. He developed theories on the concepts of human nature, and he was actually criticized for taking a deterministic stance, so stressing the irrational and instinctive forces that shape us as people. He also developed theories on the 3 structures of personality, how personality develops, levels of consciousness, dreams and the unconscious, and defense mechanisms that we all have. As previously mentioned, Freud's view of human nature places a lot of emphasis on biology and early childhood experiences. He also believed that because of their biology, people go through predictable stages of psychosocial development. So in light of this, people must struggle to find a balance between their strong sexual drives and the need to interact and behave in socially acceptable ways. Within Freud's theory of human nature as being this struggle to balance sexual needs and desires with socially acceptable behavior, he also viewed people as seeking love and approval by choosing to follow the dictates of their family and cultural contexts. He viewed biological processes as being influenced by early patterns of attachment in childhood, and then how the stages of development are handled. Let's take a closer look at Freud's theory of personality structure and the three systems that begins with the id. So according to Freud, the id is present at birth. It includes instincts, is largely unconscious, it is subjective to the individual, and it is emotional. The id's primary goal or purpose is to seek pleasure and gratification while avoiding tension and discomfort. So it's otherwise known as the pleasure principle. So the id has two important strategies for achieving pleasure and gratification through reflex actions and what's called the primary process. So reflex actions include automatic processes such as coughing, twitching, blinking, and in particular those that are kind of biologic in origin, such as when I experience a throat tickle. Now the primary process strategy is a bit more complex. It allows one to sort of form a mental image or vision of a solution or remedy for the discomfort. So anything that's kind of moving away from pleasure and sort of what could be called a wish fulfillment. So Freud viewed dreams in particular as serving this function and offering a sort of wish fulfillment, or your ability to visualize a solution. So let's take a little closer look at the second system in Freud's personality structure, the superego. The superego can be thought of as the exact opposite of the id, and it may be likened to a sort of rigid conscience that internalizes sort of the rules and guidelines of a person's world. So you might say that it's a moral code. It is perfectionistic. It's diligently kind of discriminating between good and bad and right and wrong. So it serves as an essential function in kind of curtailing the drives of the id. However, unlike the id, the superego is highly controlling and it's extreme in its directive. So this is what makes it rigid and inflexible. The third system of Freudian personality structure is the ego. So this is something that's not present at birth, and it becomes differentiated from the id as a child develops. Although sort of fuel from the id provides both the power for the ego and the superego. Now the ego is aware of both the pressures of the id and kind of the constraints or limits of the superego, and it seeks to kind of be a moderator while still meeting their needs. So one might say that a healthy ego utilizes logic, intelligence, sort of objectivity, and awareness of the external reality. So in this, it sort of considers, modifies, and then works toward integrating both sort of internal and external pressures on a person to sort of decide, for example, when and how to respond to demands, how I make wise choices, and to also be able to kind of show behaviors that promote self-preservation. So what did Freud think about life development? So according to Freud, he believed that people develop according to kind of predictable stages, and with those that occur in the first 5 years of life being the most significant. So the first stage, the oral stage of development, is pretty much the first year of a child's life, wherein the mouth is considered the most important zone of the body, which makes sense when we think of that as feeding, suckling is kind of important through that phase of life. So the stage following that, the next stage, according to Freud, is the anal stage, which occurs sort of roughly between the ages of 18 to 36 months. And so because of the significance of elimination processes and toilet training, sort of the gratification of the child moves away from oral functions and feeding to these elimination functions. So in this stage, it's thought that feelings about the body and its functions are shaped during the anal stage. Freud's third stage of development is the phallic stage, and this stage occurs between the ages of 3 to 5. During these years, feelings of pleasure become associated with the genital, and this is the time of life when masturbation and sexual fantasies develop with those discoveries. And Freud believed that at this age, children also harbor what he called unconscious sexual desires for the parent of the other gender, and accompanying that is an unconscious wish to eliminate the parent of the same gender. As those of the same gender parent kind of stands in the way of the child's desire for the other gender. So in boys, he called this Oedipus complex, or an unconscious desire for the mother, and in that a wish to eliminate the father. So in girls, the opposite of course, and the Electra complex. Now, Freud also hypothesized that the female equivalent of castration anxiety in boys is penis envy in girls, where girls allegedly become jealous and resentful because they lack a penis. Some of this thinking did become a bit problematic for Freud along the way, as one might imagine in current thinking. The next stage in Freud's theory of development is the latency stage, which occurs between the ages of 5 to 11. And he considered this as a comparatively quiet developmental period, where there's social interests developing and there's emotional growth that's focusing on goal development and strategies for achieving those goals, but otherwise a fairly quiet period, if you will. Well, the final stage in Freud's model is coined the genital stage, and this phase or stage continues throughout the lifespan. And so it's in this period that personal identities are cemented and where kind of our caring and altruistic feelings develop and positive relationships are hopefully formed. So Freud's interest in the psyche and levels of consciousness sort of led him to believe that we have 3 levels of consciousness. So there's the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. So the conscious is material and awareness, and this is always accessible to us. Our preconscious holds information that may not be part of current awareness, but which can be readily accessible. For example, I have a fairly benign memory of someone I knew years ago, but don't think of them until I see that person in a grocery store. Or, it may be something a little more aversive, such as, I have a memory of being in a car accident that, returns to me each time I go by the scene of that accident or hear the screech of brakes, as an example. So things like that. Now, the unconscious holds memories that are highly charged and include repressed drives or impulses. So they hold memories that are actually too painful for one to be constantly aware of. So what did Freud think about the unconscious mind and aspects of that? He was very interested in dream analysis. So he believed that our dreams and symptoms and errors, or what he called Freudian slips, or became coined as Freudian slips, all reflect the unconscious and its fantasies. So he also viewed our dreams as meaningful, and that they could provide opportunities to address unfulfilled desires, as well as be a vehicle to potentially assist us in resolving issues or problems. And what about Freud's thoughts on defense mechanisms that we know we all have? According to his theories, people possess an innate sort of drive towards reducing tension and anxiety, and this results in defense mechanisms. So these mechanisms, or we could call them coping strategies, they can be healthy and mature defenses that really promote adjustment and allow us to transform sort of undesirable wishes into ones that can be fulfilled. Or they can distort reality and interfere with efforts to build mature, healthy relationships. Now, when you think about what makes up defense mechanisms, literature actually identifies and describes more than 40, and so we might be able to categorize them into 4 subsets. So we can have primary versus secondary, relationship to developmental stage, psychotic versus neurotic defenses, and immature versus healthy defenses. So primary defenses include things like repression and denial, sort of keeping unacceptable thoughts from consciousness. And secondary defenses are products of primary defenses, which would make sense. Things such as projection or sublimation. So defenses associated with the oral stage include primitive defenses such as denial and distortion. Now, most sophisticated defenses are associated with later stages of development. So these would be, the mature defenses, for example, the ability to intellectualize. So whether we agree or disagree with some of Freud's thinking, he definitely had some strengths and contributions to make to the field. For example, it was a very powerful impact on our understanding of personality development, and his emphasis on childhood experiences to development, his influence of parent figures in our development and how that connects with attachment. He helped us see the healing power of talk therapy, and he made significant contributions to understanding psychological development in this respect. So, like or dislike, there's Freud. Let's summarize our session. In this session, we've looked more in depth at Freud's theories of personality and human development that are based on human drives and instincts. And he believed that the structure of personality consists of 3 systems: the id, superego, and ego. He also viewed human development as occurring through 5 stages: the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. He believed that defense mechanisms exist to help us cope with anxiety and tensions, and that these mechanisms can be adaptive or they can be maladaptive.